TitleMatchNetwork.com.
My very first question to you would be: talk about your background in the business. I know you grew up in the wrestling business.
Yeah, I was born into it. I can remember going to the shows with my dad in Amarillo. It's probably the earliest I can remember. Trying to carry his bag. I must have been about 4 or 5. And then we lived in Houston for a while. I think I was 5, 6, 7. Lived in Houston, and then we moved to the Pacific Northwest and lived up there for pretty much my whole life. Growing up, went to school there, and used to go with my dad quite a bit when I was young, and until I got into high school, and then I got into doing my own thing, and got away from it for a while.
How close were you and your father growing up?
We were real close. My parents divorced when I was 10, and my father got custody of me. So I pretty much grew up in the dressing room because my dad had custody of me. He was on the road a lot.
Wow.
And I would go with him, and he would drive home and get me to school the next day. It was kind of rough, but that's just the way it was. Yeah.
How big was your father on kayfabe back then with you?
Oh, kayfabe was real big back then. It's yeah. I can remember when my dad and Lonnie Main had their big feud, and Beauregard was involved with it. Larry Pitchford's his name, and we used to have to sneak him in the car to get him to the arena, and we'd have to drop him off like a block away. And kayfabe was real strong back then.
I'm sure you have like a ton of early road stories, from traveling around with your dad.
Yeah, I've got a lot. I can remember traveling with my dad and Ray Stevens and Pat Patterson.
Wow.
Back in the Northwest, and when Ray and Pat were tag team world champions, and yeah, a lot of guys. I wouldn't know where to start.
So I guess at what point did you say you wanted to get into the business? Did you know early on?
No, actually, I went through a period of time in high school where I disliked the business because I was in amateur wrestling and excelled in amateur wrestling, and I didn't like the business. I looked at it as how does it relate to amateur wrestling, and I couldn't see any relation there. So, but when I was going to Portland State University, and Jesse Ventura was in the area, and he rented an apartment for my dad, and he was my neighbor, and we had a fourplex there, and I took care of the fourplex and lived in one of them, and Jesse and Terry, his wife, lived in another, and so I became good friends with Jesse, and we used to party at nights, and when he would come home, and he'd come and get me, and I'd go over and sit and watch Saturday Night Live with him, and then I got to thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I liked the life that Jesse was leading, and he was making good money, and so I kind of looked at it like, I think I can do this. I knew the business, so I went to my dad and told him I wanted to break in the business, and he tried to discourage me at first, but I think he just wanted to see if I was real serious about it. So that's how I really got started. I never really trained much. I was always athletic, and I think I got in a ring 3 or 4 times, threw a few drop kicks and this, that, the other thing, and then Don Owens threw me in the ring in a tag match with my dad against Von Steigers.
I was going to ask you, was your father helpful to you?
Yeah and no. My dad just more or less told me that if you're going to stay in the business, you'll know in a couple of years, and if you don't got it, you'll know it and get out.
Who would you consider your mentor early on? Would it be your father or any of the other boys take you under their wing?
My father really didn't. He just kind of watched. He'd give me advice now and then, but
were promoters and guys harder on you because of your father, or were they easier on you?
It was both. some promoters. Don Owens was harder on me.
How did he treat you?
Well, he didn't want wrestlers to come to start wrestling in Oregon and stay there. He used to have this saying that if you thinking about buying a home out here in Oregon, if you're one of the boys, make sure it's on wheels. For whatever reason, looking back on it, he didn't want to have to deal with somebody, because there was a lot of guys wanting to come out there and settle there, because it's a beautiful part of the country, short trips, territory is great territory. You could, when it was hot, you could make good money. But he had a problem, like, getting rid of guys when their time was up, when their run was up. It's time to go. If they bought a house here, it was kind of hard for them to say, sell your house and leave.
Right. Did you travel a lot with your dad in your early days?
Oh, yeah.
As a worker?
Oh, at when I got in the business?
Yeah, did you travel with him?
No, not much at all.
I guess, how important was it for you to have a background in amateur wrestling when you broke in? Did it help you a lot?
No, actually, what helped me a lot was when I was young, 7, 8, 9 years old, I took a lot of dance. I took a lot of dancing lessons. I took ballet. And actually, ballet helped me a lot, when it comes to balance and just control of your body and being able to do a lot of things.
We'll talk about that coming up later, definitely. Memories of your first match?
Very nervous. I got basically, see, back then, you didn't lay the matches out. Move by move, you get how you're going to start the match, a couple spots during the match, and how you're going to finish it, and pretty much it's all improvised, in the interim there. So I found myself freezing during the match, and I can remember Von Steiger we broke into this 4-way, and Von Steiger had me in the corner, and I'm pounding on Von Steiger, and I froze, and I turned around to see what my dad was doing, and Von Steiger turned me around and said, "Come on, kid, keep it up," So I turned around and started throwing a bunch of potatoes on him, and got through it. But it was pretty nerve-wracking.
So you didn't have any training beforehand, as far as learning how to bump, or it was pretty much in the ring training with you?
Yeah, not like I said. I just got in the ring like 3 or 4 times before, but I used to drive the ring truck and set the ring up and do some refereeing, and I would get in there and hit the ropes. I was a natural when it came to that stuff. I could drop kick. First time I ever drop kicked, I was right on the money, and I saw guys taking bumps all the time, and I took a couple bumps. It was easy for me.
I guess, at what point did you smarten up to the business? Did you consider yourself smart when you first started wrestling, or?
I was smart when I was about 10 years old, 10 or 11. I wasn't sat down and said, "This is how it is." I just was like a slow progress. I can remember being in the dressing room when I was about 7, and one of the guys, what was his name? Jay York. Jay York snatched me up, body slammed me, gave me a backbreaker, snatched me in a headlock, gave me a couple punches to the nose, and flipped me around, all this stuff. And I'm flying around. I didn't know which way was up. And then he sat me down. And I went, wow. I heard all these pops, and I felt my back on his knee, but I didn't feel anything. It was like amazing. So that's how I was kind of like smartened up. This is how it works, kid. And I'd watch them. I'd listen to them talking over their finishes when I was 8, 9 years old. And yeah, it was just progress.
TitleMatchNetwork.com